Long ago, when the forests of ancient India stretched farther than the eye could see, there stood a magnificent Bodhi tree outside the walls of a prosperous southern city. Its roots gripped the earth like the hands of an ancient guardian. Its branches spread across the sky so widely that travelers often mistook it for a small forest of its own. Generation after generation of birds had made their homes among its countless leaves. When the morning sun touched its highest branches, thousands of black wings shimmered together like flowing silk beneath the golden light. This great tree belonged to the crows. Not through ownership, but through centuries of faithful return. Among them ruled a wise and respected king named Black Cloud. He was neither the largest crow nor the fiercest. His feathers had already begun to lose their youthful shine. Around his eyes appeared the first signs of age. Yet every crow trusted him. Because leadership is not measured by strength. It is measured by the number of lives one chooses to protect before oneself. Every dawn Black Cloud flew around the great Bodhi tree. He greeted the young. He listened to the old. He settled disputes before they became quarrels. He knew which nests sheltered new hatchlings. He remembered which elderly crows could no longer fly great distances. No member of the flock was too small to escape his attention. Many believed this kindness was the true reason the crows had prospered for so many years. Yet peace is rarely permanent. Far beyond the city, where the hills rose into jagged cliffs, lay a dark stone cavern. Its entrance was narrow. Its interior stretched deep beneath the mountain. Sunlight seldom entered. Even during the brightest afternoon, darkness ruled within. This cave belonged to another kingdom. The kingdom of the owls. Their ruler was known as Shatterer of Enemies. He possessed enormous amber eyes that pierced the darkness with frightening clarity. Among owls he was celebrated as fearless. Among every other bird he was feared. For countless generations, crows and owls had lived as enemies. No one clearly remembered how the hatred had begun. Some believed it started over territory. Others blamed forgotten kings. Some simply accepted it as the natural order of the world. When hatred survives long enough, people often forget its original cause. Only the habit remains. Every evening, as daylight faded beyond the western hills, silence settled over the Bodhi tree. The younger crows hurried back to their nests. Parents gathered their chicks beneath protective wings. Old birds tucked their heads beneath tired feathers. One by one, thousands of black eyes closed. Then darkness arrived. And with darkness, the hunters came. The owls. Silent. Almost invisible. Their wings produced no sound. Their eyes pierced every shadow. Before the sleeping crows could awaken, swift talons struck. A single scream. A flutter of feathers. Then silence returned. Night after night, the attacks continued. Each dawn the crows discovered empty nests. Broken feathers scattered across the roots. Friends who would never greet another sunrise. The young became afraid of sunset. Parents no longer slept deeply. Even Black Cloud found himself listening anxiously whenever evening approached. Leadership often carries a loneliness invisible to everyone else. Each life lost felt like a weight resting upon his own heart. One morning, after another difficult night, Black Cloud stood upon the highest branch of the Bodhi tree. The first rays of sunlight spread slowly across the forest. Thousands of crows gathered below him. The usual cheerful morning calls had disappeared. Only uneasy silence remained. Black Cloud looked across every face. Young birds. Old birds. Families. Friends. His people. He spoke quietly. My brothers. My sisters. Our sorrow has continued for too long. The forest remained completely still. We cannot continue living in fear. A young crow cried out immediately. Then let us attack. Another shouted, we are many. We can overwhelm them. Soon dozens of voices joined together. Fight. Destroy the owls. End this forever. The great Bodhi tree echoed with determination. Yet high above them, on an old branch weathered by countless seasons, one crow remained completely silent. He was the oldest crow in the kingdom. His feathers had faded almost to gray. Several scars crossed one side of his face. One wing no longer folded perfectly. Time had carved wisdom into every movement. While others shouted, he simply listened. Black Cloud noticed him. As wise leaders often do. He raised one wing gently. The entire gathering fell silent. Then the king looked toward the old crow. My old friend. You have not spoken. What does your experience see that our anger cannot? The old crow slowly lifted his head. A faint smile appeared beneath his worn beak. Then he spoke the words that would change the fate of the entire kingdom. Strength is loud. Wisdom is patient. He looked toward every young crow gathered before him. If we fight the owls where they are strongest, we shall give them exactly what they desire. The gathering grew silent once more. The old crow's eyes reflected neither fear nor hatred, only quiet understanding. And in that moment, the first seeds of a remarkable plan began to take root. The first light of morning filtered gently through the vast branches of the Bodhi tree. Thousands of crows remained gathered in silence. Only moments earlier, many had been calling for war. Now every eye rested upon the old crow. His feathers had faded with age. Several were missing altogether. The scars across his wings told stories of seasons long forgotten. He did not possess the speed of the young, nor the strength of the strongest warriors. Yet when he spoke, even the wind seemed to pause. Wisdom often enters quietly. It does not need to shout. The old crow looked slowly around the gathering. He saw anger, fear, grief, and beneath them all, love. Every young crow who demanded battle did so because they wished to protect their families. Their courage was genuine. Only their understanding remained incomplete. He nodded gently. Your hearts are brave. But bravery without understanding often becomes another name for sacrifice. Several young crows lowered their heads. The old crow continued, our enemy sees clearly in darkness. They fight best inside narrow caves. They have prepared for generations. If we rush toward them with anger, we shall offer them exactly what they have been waiting for. Black Cloud remained silent, allowing every word to settle. The oldest crow then lifted his eyes toward the distant mountains. There is another path. The younger birds leaned forward. One finally asked, what path? The old crow answered softly, the path that pride never notices. Confusion spread through the gathering. He smiled. A proud enemy watches the strong, but rarely notices the broken. No one yet understood. The old crow looked directly at King Black Cloud. My king, there is something I ask of you. Anything. Black Cloud answered without hesitation. The old crow's voice remained calm. I ask you to make me appear as a traitor. The entire tree erupted in shock. No. Several crows cried out at once. The king himself stared in disbelief. What are you saying? The old crow continued as though he had expected the reaction. Peck me. Tear away my feathers. Leave wounds upon my body. Then cast me out before everyone. Silence followed. No one moved. No one even breathed. One young crow whispered, you are asking us to hurt you. Yes. Why? So the owls will believe I have nowhere else to go. Another crow shook his head vigorously. We cannot. The old crow smiled kindly. Because you love me. Many eyes filled with tears. The old crow continued, and because you love me, you must. Black Cloud stepped forward. His voice had grown heavy. There must be another way. The old crow slowly shook his head. Sometimes, the greatest service requires the deepest personal sacrifice. The king lowered his eyes. He understood. Leadership often demands painful decisions. Not because they are desired, but because they protect others. The old crow continued explaining. I shall go to the owls. I shall tell them I was rejected. I shall offer them my loyalty. They will distrust me. At first, he smiled faintly. But pride is patient only for a little while. They will eventually believe they have won. He looked toward the distant mountains again. When they stop guarding themselves, they will reveal everything. One young crow finally asked, and then? The old crow's eyes reflected quiet certainty. Then wisdom will know what strength could never accomplish. The Bodhi tree remained silent for a long time. No one wished to wound one of their own. Especially not the elder who had guided generations. Black Cloud slowly walked toward him. My friend, if this plan fails. The old crow smiled peacefully. Then let my life purchase time for the others. The king's eyes became moist. The old crow gently touched his wing. Do not grieve before the story has ended. Then he looked toward the gathered flock. My brothers, my sisters, trust is not proven when life is easy. It is proven when sacrifice becomes necessary. No one spoke. The silence itself became agreement. Very slowly, the first young crow stepped forward. His beak trembled. I cannot. The old crow nodded kindly. I know. Another stepped forward. Then another. Finally Black Cloud closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them again, he was no longer merely a friend. He was a king protecting his people. He whispered, "Forgive us." The old crow answered, "There is nothing to forgive." One gentle peck. Then another. Feathers drifted slowly through the morning air. Each falling feather carried quiet sorrow. No one struck with anger, only with reluctant love. The old crow never cried out. Not once. Pain visited his body. But purpose remained stronger than suffering. When at last his feathers were torn and his body appeared wounded and abandoned, King Black Cloud bowed deeply before him. So did every crow upon the great Bodhi tree. Not because they were sending away a traitor, but because they were honoring the bravest among them. The old crow looked back one final time. He smiled. Then, with slow and weary wings, he turned toward the dark mountains. Toward the kingdom of his enemies. Toward a future where only wisdom could protect them all. The old crow flew alone through the fading afternoon sky. Every movement sent sharp pain through his wounded body. Several feathers drifted away whenever the wind grew stronger. His wings no longer moved with the graceful rhythm they once had. Yet he never once turned back. Far behind him, the great Bodhi tree slowly disappeared beneath the horizon. His home, his family, his king. Perhaps it would be many days before he saw them again. Perhaps he would never return at all. Such thoughts came and went like passing clouds. He did not cling to them, for when a heart has already chosen sacrifice, fear loses much of its power. As evening approached, the mountains rose before him. Dark cliffs pierced the crimson sky. The air grew colder. The forest beneath became strangely quiet. Few birds willingly flew near these peaks after sunset. Everyone knew who ruled here. The owls. The entrance to their cavern appeared like the open mouth of an ancient beast. Cold air drifted steadily from the darkness within. The old crow landed several wing lengths away. He looked at the cave for a long time. Then lowered his head. He whispered softly to himself, "May wisdom be stronger than hatred." Taking a slow breath, he began crying out. His voice echoed pitifully across the cliffs. Again. And again. Not the cry of a warrior, but the cry of someone abandoned by everyone he had ever loved. Deep inside the cave, dozens of amber eyes slowly opened. The owls had begun waking for the night. One young owl tilted his head. "Did you hear that?" Another answered, "A crow." Soon several owls emerged from the darkness. Their sharp eyes immediately noticed the wounded stranger lying upon the rocks. His feathers were torn. His body trembled. Fresh wounds still marked his wings. One owl hissed, "It must be a trick." Another replied, "Or perhaps good fortune." Within moments, word reached their king. The Owl King, shatterer of enemies, stepped slowly from the cave. He was enormous. Larger than any owl the old crow had ever seen. His amber eyes glowed like burning coals beneath the gathering dusk. Every owl respectfully lowered its head as he approached. The king studied the wounded crow without speaking. The silence stretched. Finally, he asked, "Why does a crow come willingly into the home of his enemies?" The old crow slowly lifted his head. His voice sounded weak. "Because I no longer have a home." The Owl King remained expressionless. The old crow continued, "I served the Crow King faithfully for many years. But age has stolen my strength. They called me useless." He lowered his eyes. "They mocked my advice. They pecked me. They drove me away." His wounded body spoke almost as loudly as his words. The owls exchanged uncertain glances. Some seemed convinced. Others remained suspicious. One senior owl stepped forward immediately. "My king, this cannot be trusted. A crow remains a crow, no matter how miserable he appears." Several others nodded. "Kill him now. End the danger before it begins." The old crow remained completely silent. He neither defended himself, nor begged for mercy. Sometimes silence appears more truthful than argument. The Owl King continued watching him carefully. Then asked, "If I spare you, what do you seek?" The old crow answered without hesitation, "Only a place where I may finish the remainder of my life." The king narrowed his eyes. "And why should I believe you?" The old crow looked toward the distant plains where the Bodhi tree could no longer be seen. "Because no one abandons everything they love, unless they truly have nothing left." The answer lingered in the cool mountain air. The Owl King slowly smiled. Not kindly, but proudly. He turned toward his advisors. "You worry too much. He is old. He is wounded. What harm could one broken crow possibly bring?" Several elder owls still looked uneasy. One spoke again, "Pride has defeated many kings." The Owl King laughed loudly. "I fear armies, not broken birds." He looked back toward the old crow. "You may stay." The old crow bowed deeply. "Your generosity will not be forgotten." The Owl King gestured toward the cave. "Give him a place near the entrance. He shall earn our trust." The old crow entered the cavern slowly. Darkness surrounded him. Behind him, the cave entrance gradually disappeared into the coming night. No crow had ever entered this place and lived. Yet the old crow did not allow fear to master him. Instead, he quietly observed. Every tunnel, every stone, every movement, every habit. For true wisdom often begins not with action, but with patient observation. Far away, beneath the great Bodhi tree, King Black Cloud gazed silently toward the distant mountains. He whispered into the night, "May our friend return safely." The wind carried his prayer across the dark forest, toward a lonely crow walking calmly into the heart of his enemy's kingdom. The old crow's first night inside the owl's cavern passed without sleep. The cave was unlike the open world he had known all his life. The air was cool and heavy. Moisture clung to the stone walls. Every sound echoed through the narrow passages before disappearing into darkness. Around him, hundreds of owls prepared for the coming night. Some sharpened their talons against the rocks. Others stretched their broad wings. The younger owls spoke proudly about the raids they had made against the crows. The old crow listened in silence. Not a single feather moved. Not a single word escaped his beak. He understood an important truth. Those who arrive eager to prove themselves often reveal too much. Those who quietly observe often learn everything. Near the entrance of the cave, a small hollow had been given to him as a resting place. It was neither comfortable nor welcoming. But he accepted it without complaint. Humility, he knew, was the safest disguise. As dusk settled over the mountains, the Owl King emerged from the deepest chamber. Every owl immediately lowered its head. King Shatterer of Enemies spoke with confidence. "Tonight, we hunt again." A wave of excitement spread through the cave. The old crow lowered his head even further. Inside, however, his heart grew heavy. He knew where they were going. Toward the great Bodhi tree. Toward his own people. He could do nothing. Not yet. Sometimes wisdom demands the strength to wait while one's heart aches. The owls departed silently into the night. Soon the cave became almost empty. Only a few elderly guards remained behind. The old crow watched carefully. He noted which tunnels they used. Which passages were blocked by stone? Which openings allowed fresh air to enter? Every detail settled quietly into his memory. When dawn arrived, the hunting party returned. Some owls carried feathers caught upon their claws. Others laughed as they spoke of frightened crows fleeing through the darkness. The old crow lowered his eyes. He refused to let sorrow become visible. A spy ruled by emotion soon ceases to be a spy. Days slowly became weeks. Weeks became many quiet cycles of sunrise and sunset. The old crow never hurried. Never asked unnecessary questions. Never volunteered information too eagerly. Instead, he became useful. When younger owls argued, he offered calm advice. When food was divided unfairly, he suggested peaceful solutions. When disagreements arose between hunting groups, he quietly helped settle them. Little by little, the owls began saying, "The old crow is different." Another replied, "He understands wisdom." Even those who once demanded his death began greeting him with respect. One evening, the Owl King summoned him. "You have surprised me." The old crow bowed. "I only wish to serve." The king nodded. "You seem to understand strategy." The old crow answered carefully, "I have simply lived long enough to see what pride often misses." The Owl King smiled. "I like that answer. From that day onward, he invited the old crow to attend discussions of military plans. At first, the old crow spoke rarely. When he did speak, his advice appeared to favor the owls. He suggested safer hunting routes, warned against needless risks, encouraged careful planning. Everything he said benefited them, or so they believed. Trust grows slowly, like the roots of an ancient tree. One act alone rarely creates it. Many small moments do. As the seasons turned, even the Owl King's closest advisors relaxed. Only one elderly owl remained uneasy. His name was Gray Feather. He had served 3 generations of Owl Kings. Experience had made him cautious. One evening, after the council ended, Gray Feather quietly approached his king. "My king, what troubles you now?" "The crow." The Owl King sighed. "Again?" Gray Feather nodded. "A wise enemy does not stop being wise because he appears wounded." The king smiled confidently. "He has served us faithfully for many months." Gray Feather answered, "That is exactly why I worry." The king laughed. "You fear shadows." Gray Feather lowered his head. "No. I fear pride." The king dismissed him with a wave of his wing. "The matter is settled." Gray Feather obeyed. Yet as he walked away, he glanced once toward the old crow. Their eyes met for only a brief moment. Neither spoke. But the old crow understood. This elder owl saw more deeply than the others. He would require patience. Perhaps even greater patience than before. For the wisest guardians are always the last to lower their watch. That night, while the owls slept peacefully inside the mountain, the old crow sat quietly near the entrance. Above him, countless stars filled the silent sky. He whispered softly into the cool night air, "Wisdom must never become impatient." Then he closed his eyes and continued waiting. The seasons continued to turn. Morning after morning, the old crow quietly performed the same simple routines. He greeted the younger owls with courtesy. He never interrupted the elders. He accepted the smallest portion of food without complaint. He never sought honor. Never asked for comfort. Never tried to appear important. Slowly, something remarkable happened. The owls stopped seeing him as a crow. They simply saw someone who had always been there. That is how careful deception often succeeds. Not through dramatic lies, but through ordinary familiarity. The Owl King grew especially fond of him. Whenever difficult questions arose, he would ask, "What does our old friend think?" The old crow always answered with measured humility, "A king already sees farther than I." Only after speaking those words would he quietly offer a suggestion. The Owl King enjoyed such conversations. Not because the crow praised him, but because the praise gently fed the pride already living inside his heart. Pride rarely enters all at once. It grows little by little, like moss upon stone, until eventually, it covers everything. Only Gray Feather, the oldest owl advisor, remained watchful. He noticed small things others ignored. The old crow never slept deeply. His eyes wandered across the cave more often than seemed natural. He quietly counted returning hunting parties. He watched how food was stored. He observed every tunnel, every corner, every shadow. Gray Feather mentioned these observations once again. "My king." The crow still watches too carefully. The Owl King smiled. "A wise advisor observes. That is why I keep him." Gray Feather sighed softly. "A guest who learns every corner of your house may not always remain only a guest." The king laughed. "You see danger everywhere." Gray Feather answered quietly, "Only because danger often arrives where confidence refuses to look." The conversation ended there. No one listened further. The old crow lowered his head respectfully. Yet inside, he understood something important. The greatest obstacle was no longer suspicion. It was time. He had learned almost everything he needed. Still, he waited. Wisdom knows that acting one day too early often destroys years of preparation. Then one quiet afternoon, opportunity arrived. Unlike the owls, whose lives awakened after sunset, the daylight hours belonged to deep sleep. The entire cavern became unusually silent. Only soft breathing echoed through the stone chambers. The old crow remained awake. Very carefully, he walked through the outer passages. No one stopped him now. He had become familiar, trusted, almost invisible. He reached the highest ledge overlooking the cavern. From there, for the first time, he saw the entire kingdom at once. His sharp eyes quietly studied everything. The entrance. Only one. Narrow. Steep. Easy to block. Dry grass lined the floor near the opening. Bundles of twigs had been gathered for nests. Old branches lay stacked against the stone walls. Years of nesting had filled the entrance chamber with dry, brittle materials. One spark would be enough. The old crow closed his eyes for a brief moment. Not because he celebrated, but because certainty had finally arrived. The mountain itself had revealed its weakness. He committed every detail to memory. Every stone, every turn, every pile of dry grass, every shadow. Nothing could be forgotten. Then, just as quietly as he had left, he returned to his resting place. No owl stirred. No feather moved. Even Gray Feather remained asleep. The old crow looked toward the distant cave entrance where a thin beam of afternoon sunlight reached the stone floor. He whispered almost silently, "The time has come." But wisdom remained patient even now. He would not act inside the enemy's home. Not yet. Instead, he must return. Only together could the crows complete what one bird alone never could. That evening, as the Owl King prepared another night of hunting, he smiled warmly toward the old crow. "You have served us well." The old crow bowed. "I have merely been grateful for your generosity." The Owl King nodded proudly. "You are no longer a stranger here." The old crow lowered his eyes. "No, I am not." The words carried two meanings. Only one of them was true. When darkness covered the mountains once more, the owls flew away toward their nightly hunt. The cave slowly emptied. The old crow remained near the entrance, watching, waiting. Then, when the last pair of silent wings disappeared into the night, he spread his worn wings. For the first time in many months, he turned toward home. The night sky stretched endlessly above the ancient forests. Countless stars shimmered softly over the sleeping world. For the first time in many months, the old crow flew not toward the mountains, but away from them. Behind him, the owl kingdom disappeared into darkness. Ahead, somewhere beyond the rivers and valleys, stood the great Bodhi tree. Home. Every beat of his weary wings carried him closer to those who had trusted him enough to let him go. The journey felt longer than he remembered. Age had slowed him. His old wounds still ached whenever the wind shifted. Yet his heart had never felt lighter. The mission had succeeded. Now only one task remained: to bring everyone safely through the final test. Long before dawn, the familiar outline of the Bodhi tree appeared against the eastern horizon. The old crow slowed his flight. He circled once above the sleeping branches. Not because he doubted his welcome, but because he wished to be certain no owls had followed him. Only after satisfying himself did he descend. The first young crow to notice him gasped in disbelief. "It is him." Within moments, whispers spread from branch to branch. "The elder has returned. The elder has returned." Soon the entire tree awakened. Thousands of crows filled the branches. Some laughed with relief. Others wept openly. Many had quietly believed they would never see him again. King Black Cloud descended from the highest branch. For several heartbeats neither king nor elder spoke. Then the king stepped forward and gently touched the old crow's shoulder with his wing. "My friend, you came home." The old crow smiled. "I promised." The gathered flock remained completely silent. Every bird understood that many months of suffering had led to this moment. Black Cloud looked carefully at the elder. His missing feathers had begun to grow back. The scars remained. But something in his eyes had changed. They were calmer. Stronger. The king asked quietly, "Did they trust you?" The old crow nodded. "Completely." A ripple of astonishment passed through the crowd. Even the youngest birds fell silent. The king continued, "Tell us everything." The old crow slowly looked across the countless faces before him. Then he began. He spoke of the mountain cave. Its narrow entrance. The sleeping habits of the owls. The location of every chamber. The single exit. The dry grass. The piles of brittle branches. The daily routines. The changing guards. Nothing had escaped his attention. No detail had been forgotten. The crows listened with growing amazement. One young warrior finally burst out, "We can attack tonight." Several others immediately agreed. "Yes. They are vulnerable. They trust us no longer." The old crow gently raised one wing. The excitement gradually faded. "Wisdom," he said softly, "never allows excitement to outrun preparation." The forest became quiet once again. He continued, "The cave has only one entrance. The passage is narrow. The dry nesting grass lies close to the opening." He paused. "That is where the mountain itself will become our ally." The younger crows looked puzzled. The old crow smiled faintly. "No army defeats another through courage alone. The world itself often offers victory to those patient enough to observe." King Black Cloud nodded slowly. He now understood the elder's complete design. The old crow looked toward the eastern horizon where the first hint of dawn had begun to brighten the sky. "We shall not attack today." The younger birds looked disappointed. He continued, "Today, we rest. Tonight, we prepare. And tomorrow. He stopped. Not because he doubted the outcome, but because wise leaders never celebrate before the work is complete. The king addressed the gathering. Every crow shall follow the elder's instructions. No one acts alone. No one acts early. No one allows anger to replace discipline. The flock answered together. We obey. The old crow felt a quiet warmth within his heart. Months of loneliness. Months of danger. Months of silence. All had led to this single morning. He looked once more across his people. Young birds. Old birds. Families. Friends. The kingdom still stood. Not because it had been stronger than its enemy, but because it had been willing to trust wisdom when strength seemed more tempting. The sun slowly rose above the forest. Golden light spread across the great Bodhi tree. The old crow closed his eyes briefly. Tomorrow would decide everything. Today, there was only one thing left to do: prepare with calm hearts. For wisdom reaches its greatest strength only when guided by patience. The day passed in complete silence. No crow left the great Bodhi tree without permission. No one spoke loudly. Even the youngest bird sensed that something important was approaching. The old crow spent the daylight hours walking quietly from branch to branch. He did not deliver inspiring speeches. He did not promise certain victory. Instead, he checked every small detail. Sometimes the smallest detail decides the largest outcome. He watched young crows practice carrying small sticks in their beaks. He reminded them not to grip too tightly. Otherwise the burning wood would fall too soon. He reminded them not to fly too low. Otherwise the wind might extinguish the flame. He reminded them to trust one another. Because no single crow could accomplish what the flock would achieve together. King Black Cloud observed all of this with admiration. Leadership, he realized once again, was not the ability to command. It was the ability to prepare others so carefully that fear no longer ruled them. As sunset slowly painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the old crow gathered the entire kingdom one final time. Thousands of black wings filled the ancient Bodhi tree. No voice interrupted the stillness. The old crow looked across every face. Young warriors, elder guardians, parents, birds who had lost friends during the long years of conflict. He spoke gently. Tonight, do not fly with hatred. Many looked surprised. He continued, if anger carries you into the sky, you will become no wiser than those we oppose. The forest remained perfectly still. Our purpose is not revenge. Our purpose is to protect those waiting at home. The words settled into every heart. The old crow lifted one small branch from the ground. He held it before everyone. This, he said quietly, will do what force alone never could. The younger crows now understood. Each would carry a single burning twig. Not a heavy log. Not a great burden. Just one small flame. One crow alone could accomplish very little. 1,000 crows acting together could change history. The old crow smiled softly. Never underestimate the power of many small acts performed with one peaceful mind. Darkness gradually covered the forest. Far away, the owl kingdom had already awakened. Inside the mountain cave, the Owl King prepared for another night's hunt. He laughed confidently. The crows grow weaker every night. Several younger owls cheered. Gray Feather remained silent. He looked toward the empty place near the entrance where the old crow usually rested. Something felt wrong. My king, he spoke quietly. The crow has not returned. The Owl King waved his wing dismissively. He is old. Perhaps he sleeps elsewhere. Gray Feather frowned. He has never failed to return before. The king laughed. You worry too much. But Gray Feather no longer answered. A quiet unease settled within him. Far away, beneath the great Bodhi tree, thousands of crows prepared to leave. Each carried one tiny burning branch. The flames were small, gentle, carefully protected from the wind. From above, the flock looked like a river of floating stars crossing the night sky. King Black Cloud flew beside the old crow. My friend. Yes? If everything succeeds, what shall history remember? The old crow smiled without looking away from the distant mountains. I hope that it remembers not my name. The king looked surprised. The elder continued, I hope it remembers that wisdom belongs to every heart willing to listen. The mountain peaks finally appeared ahead. The dark cave waited silently beneath them. No owl noticed the approaching crows. The hunters had become too certain of their own safety. The old crow quietly gave the signal. The flock separated into many smaller groups. Each followed the route he had carefully described. No confusion. No panic. No wasted movement. Every bird knew exactly where to fly. Exactly where to place its burning twig. The cave entrance came into view. Dry grasses rested exactly where the old crow remembered. Nothing had changed. He lowered his wing. The signal was given. One by one, the burning branches descended silently toward the entrance. Like stars falling from heaven. Not in anger. Not in triumph. But as the final movement of a plan patiently woven through many months. Inside the cave, the first thin ribbons of smoke began drifting upward. Gray Feather suddenly opened his eyes. He understood. At last, he understood everything. But wisdom discovered too late rarely changes destiny. Outside, the old crow watched quietly. His expression held neither joy nor hatred. Only solemn acceptance. He whispered to himself, "Pride closed the ears that wisdom tried to reach." The mountain wind carried the smoke upward into the silent night. And the ancient rivalry that had lasted for generations finally reached its end, not because one side was stronger, but because one side had forgotten that arrogance is often the first step toward defeat. The first wisps of smoke drifted silently into the mountain cavern. At first, no one noticed. The Owl Kingdom had become too comfortable, too certain, too convinced that no danger could reach them. Outside, the crows remained perfectly silent. No triumphant cries. No celebration. Only disciplined patience. The old crow watched the narrow entrance with calm eyes. Everything now depended not on strength, but on the choices the owls would make. Inside the cave, Gray Feather rose first. His sharp eyes searched the shadows. The faint scent of smoke reached him. He immediately spread his wings. "My king!" The Owl King opened one eye lazily. "What is it now?" "There is smoke." The king looked toward the entrance. Only a thin gray ribbon floated through the air. He laughed softly. "Someone's nest is smoldering." Gray Feather shook his head. "No. This smoke comes from outside." The Owl King finally stood. His expression remained relaxed. "Then put it out." Several younger owls hurried toward the entrance. But as they reached the first chamber, more smoke rolled inward. The dry nesting grass near the opening had begun to glow with small flames. One young owl cried, "Fire!" Panic spread through the cave. The Owl King shouted, "Remain calm." Yet fear moves faster than commands. More owls rushed toward the entrance. The passage was narrow. Too narrow. Those nearest the opening tried to push forward. Those behind pressed harder. Within moments, the single exit became crowded. Gray Feather's heart sank. He had feared this very moment. He looked upward. The smoke thickened. The dry branches that had rested there for years now carried the flames from one nest to another. The fire itself remained small. But the cave had become its companion. The mountain had turned against its own inhabitants. Gray Feather spoke urgently. "My king, we must clear the entrance." The Owl King finally realized the danger. "Move." But confusion had already replaced discipline. Some owls flew deeper into the cave. Others pushed toward the exit. No one listened. Fear had become their new ruler. Outside, the old crow quietly lowered his head. He whispered, "This is why wisdom must be heard before crisis arrives." King Black Cloud stood beside him. His eyes remained fixed upon the cave. "There will be no victory songs tonight." The old crow nodded. "No. A wise heart never celebrates suffering." The flames continued spreading around the entrance. Not as an explosion, but slowly, patiently. Exactly as dry grass always burns. Gray Feather reached the opening at last. For one brief moment, he saw the old crow standing outside beneath the night sky. Their eyes met across the smoke. Neither hatred nor anger lived within that final glance. Only understanding. Gray Feather lowered his head ever so slightly. The old crow returned the gesture. Two elders. Both servants of their kingdoms. Both lovers of wisdom. One had spoken. The other had listened. Only their king had refused. The smoke thickened further. Gray Feather turned back toward his people. His last words echoed quietly through the cavern. A kingdom falls. Long before its walls do. It falls. The moment wisdom is no longer welcomed. The smoke swallowed his voice. Outside, silence covered the mountains. The crows remained still until dawn. No one entered the cave. No one mocked the defeated. When the first light of morning touched the cliffs, the old crow slowly approached the entrance. The fire had already died. The mountain stood quiet once more. The long conflict that had haunted generations had finally ended. Not because the crows hated more fiercely. Not because they fought more bravely. But because one kingdom chose humility, while the other chose arrogance. The old crow bowed once toward the mountain. He offered no insult, only respect for lives lost through pride. King Black Cloud stepped beside him. "My friend." "Yes? What shall we teach our children?" The old crow looked toward the rising sun, then answered softly, "Teach them this. Never become so certain of your own wisdom that you stop listening to the wisdom of others." The golden light spread slowly across the ancient forest. The night of fear had ended. A new morning had begun. Morning sunlight slowly spread across the mountains. For the first time in countless generations, no shadow of silent wings crossed the sky from the stone cavern. The forest seemed different. The wind itself felt lighter. Birdsong, long absent from the valleys at dawn, gradually returned. The great Bodhi tree awakened to a peace that many of its oldest inhabitants had never known. Young crows left their nests without fear. Parents no longer glanced nervously toward the western mountains. The long season of waiting had ended. Yet the old crow did not celebrate. Instead, he quietly walked to the highest branch beside King Black Cloud. Together they watched the rising sun. Neither spoke for a long while. Finally, the king broke the silence. "My friend, you have saved us all." The old crow gently shook his head. "No. I merely reminded everyone that wisdom is strongest when many hearts act as one." Black Cloud smiled. "Even now, you refuse to take credit." The elder chuckled softly. "Credit belongs to those who listened." The youngest crow carried a burning twig. The oldest guarded the nests. The mothers remained calm. The scouts obeyed. No victory belongs to one bird. It belongs to every heart willing to place the whole above itself. The king lowered his head thoughtfully. He understood. Leadership was never about standing above others. It was about helping others rise together. Later that morning, the entire kingdom gathered beneath the vast branches of the Bodhi tree. The oldest crows remembered friends lost through many years of conflict. The youngest knew those names only through stories. King Black Cloud stood before them. He raised one wing. Silence settled naturally. "My brothers, my sisters, today we are safe. But let us remember why." He turned toward the old crow. "Not because one bird was clever. but because one bird remained humble enough to wait. The old crow stepped forward. He looked across the sea of black feathers, then spoke quietly. There is something more important than victory. Many tilted their heads. He continued, hatred teaches every generation to repeat the mistakes of the one before it. Wisdom breaks that chain. He paused. If our children grow believing that every owl must forever be hated, then today's victory becomes tomorrow's burden. The younger birds listened carefully. Some seemed confused. The elder smiled gently. We defended our home. We did not choose hatred. The difference matters. One young crow raised his wing. But what if another enemy comes? The old crow answered, then meet them first with clear eyes. Not with inherited anger. If peace is possible, choose peace. If protection becomes necessary, protect without cruelty. And if wisdom offers another path, never ignore it because your pride prefers battle. The entire gathering remained silent. The wind rustled gently through the ancient Bodhi leaves. It almost sounded as though the tree itself approved. King Black Cloud then did something unexpected. He removed the simple woven circlet that marked him as king. Holding it in both wings, he turned toward the elder. My friend, no reward I offer can equal what you have given. But please accept this. The old crow smiled warmly, then stepped back. I cannot. The king looked puzzled. You have earned it. The elder nodded. A crown is not the reward for wisdom. It is the responsibility to protect others. You already carry it well. The king slowly lowered the circlet. His eyes shone with quiet gratitude. The elder continued, if you truly wish to honor me, teach every future leader to welcome honest counsel, especially when that counsel is difficult to hear. The king bowed deeply. I promise. The promise echoed gently beneath the ancient tree. And many young crows silently vowed that they too would remember. Not merely the story of victory, but the deeper lesson hidden beneath it. That wisdom does not seek applause, it seeks understanding. As evening approached, the old crow returned to his favorite branch high above the forest. The same branch where, months earlier, he had first spoken of patience instead of war. The world below looked peaceful. Children played among the branches. Parents laughed again. The forest breathed quietly. The old crow closed his eyes. Sometimes, the greatest reward for courage is simply hearing the sound of peace. Many years passed. The great Bodhi tree continued to spread its branches toward the sky. New generations of crows were born. Older generations quietly departed. Seasons came and went as they always had. Yet one thing never faded. The story. Young crows who had never seen the owl kingdom would often gather around the oldest branches at sunset. There, the elder birds told them about the time when fear ruled every night. They spoke of the brave king, Black Cloud. They spoke of the countless crows who trusted one another. And most of all, they spoke of one old crow who had understood that patience often wins battles long before they begin. But something curious happened over time. The story slowly changed. Not in its facts, but in the lesson people remembered. At first, young birds admired the clever plan. Later generations admired the courage. Eventually, the wisest teachers emphasized something deeper. They would ask the young, what defeated the owls? The children almost always answered, the fire. The elders smiled gently. No. The fire ended the conflict. It did not begin the victory. The young birds looked puzzled. The teacher continued, the victory began. The day one old crow chose wisdom instead of anger. It grew stronger. When the king listened instead of commanding, it became possible. Because thousands of ordinary crows trusted one another. And finally, the enemy defeated itself the moment it refused to hear wise counsel. The children sat quietly. Many had never considered that answer before. The oldest teachers would often end the lesson with these words, remember. The greatest danger to any kingdom is not the strength of its enemies. It is the moment pride convinces its leaders that they no longer need advice. Years passed. The old crow eventually completed his long life. He departed peacefully beneath the same Bodhi tree he had spent his life protecting. King Black Cloud himself stood beside him until the final moment. No monuments were built. No grand statues were carved. The old crow had never wanted such things. Instead, the kingdom honored him differently. Every new leader, before receiving the crown, was required to sit alone upon the elder's favorite branch until sunrise. There, in silence, each future king asked himself 3 questions. Have I listened carefully? Have I allowed pride to speak louder than wisdom? Do I seek victory, or do I seek the safety of those entrusted to me? Only after answering honestly could the crown be placed upon their head. Generations later, travelers passing beneath the great Bodhi tree sometimes wondered why the crows lived in such remarkable harmony. The birds simply smiled, because the greatest inheritance is not wealth, nor power, nor even victory. It is wisdom passed from one heart to another. ####Back at Jetavana Monastery. The Buddha finished speaking. The monks remained completely still. The evening breeze moved softly through the monastery gardens. No one wished to break the silence. The Buddha looked across the assembly with calm compassion. Then he said, "My children, in every age there are those who believe force alone can solve every problem. But force without wisdom creates only another cycle of suffering." He continued, "The old crow never allowed hatred to rule his heart. He acted not from revenge, but from responsibility. He protected his people. Yet even after victory, he warned them not to inherit hatred." The monks listened carefully. The Buddha then revealed the identities from that former life. The wise old crow was I. King Black Cloud was one who later became a righteous disciple. The cautious owl elder was one who, through many lives, continued seeking wisdom. The proud owl king was one who repeatedly ignored wise counsel until experience became his teacher. The Buddha smiled gently. Then he offered the final teaching. A kingdom is protected not by walls, but by leaders who remain humble enough to hear the truth. Patience is not weakness. It is wisdom refusing to become the servant of anger. The wise do not ask, "How can I defeat my enemy?" They ask, "How can I prevent suffering from growing further?" The monks bowed deeply. Many reflected upon moments when pride had closed their own ears. Others silently resolved to become better listeners. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond Jetavana, peace settled over the monastery. And the ancient tale of the old crow continued its journey through countless generations. Not merely as a story of strategy, but as a timeless reminder that the greatest victories are won long before the first battle begins, inside a mind that chooses wisdom over pride.